Stefano.
Ciao.
Great to see you
Nice
again.
to meet you again.
Have
Can
a
I see
seat.
it?
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you so
yeah.
much. So, why are we here?
Well, it's a busy place, as you can hear.
Yeah, loud.
And since we're going to talk about my course,
Oh, yes.
Globalization and You, and I thought this would be a great place to talk about it because it's a place where globalization comes together, and you can see it written onto the landscape of the city. We've got loads of signs of it all around us. You've got these big corporate condos going in. You've got a TV station over here. The monorail, which is zooming along here, was a sign of Seattle's early attempt to put itself on the global stage as a global city. But then you have to remember, this monorail was what protesters marched underneath when they...
In 99, right?
Yeah, for the WTO.
Wow.
They were protesting the World Trade Organization meeting that was happening downtown, and they walked from over there underneath the Seattle the space
the Space
Needle and the Memorial Stadium. They walked all along underneath the monorail downtown. So this site was a place where that happened too.
Yeah.
And then you've got like just stuff, all the eateries around here with food from all over the world, Italian, Thai. You've got an immigration and citizenship place, Fat City German Motors, and then in the middle of it all, you have Chief Seattle.
Oh yeah.
And you might say, well, that's not a sign of globalization.
You know, it's not a globalization. Yeah, it's kind of a historic thing. So.
But it's a historic marker of a global encounter, and the chief is actually putting his hand up in acknowledgement of these European explorers coming into the area. So it's a moment of global encounter between the indigenous society and what became eventually American society.
I'm getting a little confused though. So the course is about globalization, which I'm not 100% sure if I understand what it is, but yeah. But are we gonna do something historic too? How is that gonna work?
It's very important for me in this class to teach students that globalization is not new, that the contemporary forms of global integration that get called globalization, that's the main focus of the course. But to put that in context, one of the things I teach is that globalization has a history, including the history of colonialism and imperialism.
Yeah.
So that's one reason for reflecting on that kind of native encounter with the colonialists as they arrived.
And this is a geography class?
It's a geography class, but it's also it's
Wow.
cross-listed with a Jackson School class because I'm a professor of both geography and international studies.
Wow. And I'm still trying to make sense because I thought that geography was about rivers and mountains and map. So what does the globalization has to do with geography? How does it make sense?
Well, globalization is changing the landscape, it's changing spatial relations.
Yeah.
Some people talk about it as a form of time-space compression, like the time is being speeded up and space is being shrunk. And so it creates all sorts of geographical transformations.
Yeah.
So it's a very geographical topic. On the flip side though, I think it's important to stress, and lots of people don't realize that geography is about more than just maps.
Oh,
right?
okay.
It's about more than
Good to
just
know.
landforms and so forth. I think a lot of American kids, they get their geography in elementary school and then they never go back to it. So they think geography is just place names on maps. But geography as a modern discipline is a very interdisciplinary kind of discipline. It embraces economics, sociology, political science, cultural studies, and it brings them together to try to understand how social relations in all those diverse forms change spatial relations, and reciprocally how spatial relations change social relations. So as we build global connections through transportation infrastructure, let's say, we also make new social connections possible.
You keep on saying social, it kind of makes me think about social science, because again, the degree is called social sciences, but I'm not even sure what social science actually means. Does it mean like all this coming together? How would you define social sciences?
Well, as you know, I'm the director of the degree, and so I've been thinking a lot about this. For me, it's really important to think of the social sciences very broadly, And they are really about how societies organize themselves, how they create structures that shape human behavior,
Yeah.
how we understand those structures, how we can collect data, quantitative and qualitative data about those social relations,
Yeah.
to actually then work out what the structures are that shape our lives, that create the conditions in which we make our choices as individuals. So, a lot of psychology is focused more on the individual, on how individuals make sense of reality.
Yeah.
And social sciences put that individual behavior in a broader context.
Kind of makes sense, because again, you mentioned something about it when we talked before, but I was just like wondering, how does geography fits into the whole social science idea? And I mean, it kind of makes a little bit more sense now. And how do you feel about teaching this online?
Teaching online offers a lot of good new opportunities to capture the complexity of social
Yeah.
relations. Obviously, the online technology we have is a technology. It's something that humans have created.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of natural science, computer science, engineering. It tells us how that technology actually operates. But as a technology, it opens up new forms of communication.
Yeah.
And new forms of sharing information and knowledge. And that's where I think it's really exciting for teaching, because you can combine a lecture, which we can record with video and so
Yeah.
forth, with access for the students to all these online materials, both formal data repositories of various kinds, the US Census, or a whole archive of historical photographs. All of that's online and you can connect students to it. But also more popular culture artifacts,
Yeah.
movies, YouTube
Wow.
videos, and include those into the teaching, and ideally make it a very interactive experience for the students too. One of the things I think is very important in terms of making this degree a success for the actual students taking it is that we allow them to connect with each other as well as with an individual professor. The courses shouldn't be just a bunch of standalone
Yeah.
courses. They should enable everybody taking them to feel part and be part of a real learning community. And again, the online technology helps us do that with various kinds of discussion boards, email interactions, webinars with faculty, and the sharing of online work amongst students.
So we're gonna watch movies and do all these things in your course too?
Yeah,
Oh,
we've got
wow.
a lot of movies in
Wow.
in this course, 323. It's called Globalization and You, and part of that title is about helping students understand how globalization shapes their own personal life, but in turn, it's about sharing those reflections with other students. So one of the things that students will be able to do is do a research project on a global corporation, tell a story about it. They can include their own video material in their research
Yeah.
paper, their research artifact for this piece of work. And so they're not just going to be consumers of video, but if they want, producers as well.
Wow. And is there anything that you think I should read if I want to prepare for the course? I kind of sounds like there's a lot of ground to cover. Any book I should start reading? Any author I should start thinking about?
Well, that's a good question. The textbook for the course is one that I've written myself,
Wow.
Introducing Globalization. The subtitle of the book is Ties, Tensions, and Uneven Integration.
Yep.
And it is a required text for this course.
Yep.
And if students want to get it early and start reading it, I think that's a good idea. If you're interested, I mean, I think it's a good idea. One of the things I include in this book is a glossary at the end, which includes a lot of the jargon that we go over in the course. terms like neoliberalism, for example, and some of those terms are a little bit counterintuitive what they mean.
Yeah.
So if you get a hold of the textbook early and you start to go through the glossary, it's helpful. But I think more important than that you can pick up the book anytime, but much more important is starting to take note of the media that's all around us that is full of commentary on globalization. Whether it's a newspaper like this one I'm reading, The Guardian Weekly. I love this newspaper because it's a weekly, and you can tell I'm originally from Britain, and so I like this. It comes out of Britain, but it also includes pieces of Le Monde from France and bits of the US press as well. It collects them together in a weekly. I think getting a paper like this, or The Economist magazine, which is a pro-business magazine, and starting to read it carefully with a look at how it's dealing with controversies over globalization. Right now, for example, there's a new trade deal being developed between the United States and the Asian countries, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, and a lot of the business pages are full of commentary about this new trade deal. There's another trade deal, in fact, with the Europeans being developed at the same time. And coming into my course with an interest in that would help you kind of see why the course is significant, and why the vocabulary and ideas we introduce in the course are useful for helping you to make sense of these important news debates.
So think about like the terminology. Do I have to come in the course knowing like all these economic terms, strange things, or
No.
it's okay?
No, it's not.
Good.
It's not important for you to have taken an economics course beforehand.
That's big.
I think it probably would add to the experience, because what I offer departs somewhat from a traditional orthodox economics outlook. I'm much more interested in the political economy, in the way in which economics is playing out with all kinds of political repercussions that lots of economic models tend to see as externalities that they don't really focus on. And I'm interested in how those political structures are locked into place by economic relationships. So taking an econ class beforehand, like Econ 200 that we offer in the online degree, would be a good idea. But it's not necessary at all, because a lot of all of the terminology I introduce is different from and in addition to a traditional economics vocabulary and terminological lexicon.
And what are like the key terms that you're going to be focusing on? I mean, besides the globalization, is it something you can think about?
Yeah, the big one that I already introduced is neoliberalism, which is a term that we use to describe the political economic reforms of market-led global development. And when countries organize their political reforms on the basis of what they perceive to be like market needs, they all tend to do the same things. And those things include privatization, the deregulation of business, the reduction of taxation on the wealthy, the cutbacks in state services that then requires, a tendency to move away from support for unions and the rights of workers, and a focus on maintaining the value of money through anti-inflationary measures of various kinds. Those are traditional neoliberal reforms, and they have become extraordinarily widespread globally, such that many people think of them as globalization. When some people say globalization, they often think, oh, that's what you mean. Put in place those market reforms. But they do something else at the same time, which I try to step back from and provide a critical perspective on in my course. They tend to say, we have to make those reforms because of globalization, because we have a globalized economy, we have to go with these pro-market reforms. And if we don't, we're just going to fall further and further behind. And my course is about unpacking that logic of that argument.
Nice. So globalization, neoliberalism, any other terms, or we're just gonna encounter
Well,
a bunch?
Another thing that I am keen to emphasize in the course is that globalization is not just leading to interconnection, it's also reproducing old asymmetries between countries in the world,
Yeah.
and it's also introducing new kinds of inequalities between people within countries. We've seen some global inequalities decrease as China has developed and India has developed. Large numbers of people have come out of dire poverty, but at the same time, within countries around the world, both in China and India, but also within countries like ours here in the United States, you're seeing growing inequality, and that's a direct outcome of adopting neoliberal reforms. So inequality with interdependency is sort of the conundrum on which my course turns. And so we have to look at inequality, and that in turn means looking at measures of inequality, like the Gini coefficient, which is a measure of inequality.
How do you spell it?
Gini, well, it's actually, you'd be interested to know this, named after an Italian.
Oh.
Yeah. He was fascinated with how you measure national population
Oh, wow.
statistics in different ways, and one of his measures that he came up with is called the Gini coefficient. It's a measurement of inequality in income in a population. Yeah. He was a problematic character, though. He aligned himself with the fascists, with Mussolini.
Oh, wow.
And he was fascinated with racial superiority ideas and so forth. So using his coefficient, though, doesn't mean we have to buy into the rest of what he was talking about.
That's good. So just to make sure I understand, and you mentioned something at the beginning talking about the complexity of globalization. So we're not going to just focusing on neoliberalism, correct? We're just going to look at, because as you said, like the history, so like other stuff of globalization, other kind of globalization too?
Yeah, it's not just the macroeconomic reforms.
Yeah.
No, there's two other elements that are important that we get to in the course. One is, how do those reforms, how do those global forces, those global market relations affect you individually?
Yeah.
And so we look a lot at how personal choices are framed by those larger social structures of globalization, and in particular how people are increasingly looking at their whole life course as a series of consumer choices and investment choices. And I try to provide some way of understanding that as a historically novel way of organizing our everyday lives. That's one non-economic aspect of the course. And then the other big one is something that we get into towards the end of the course, which is alternatives. What are the real alternatives, the meaningful alternatives to all these market-led reforms? What are people talking about as preferable ways of organizing society, and are they actually possible or not? My course, I have to say, doesn't offer all the answers. It doesn't offer an agenda for social change, but it does suggest that alternatives are possible. It does suggest that we can do a lot differently and not accept the idea that there is no alternative to market reform. And that's how the course ends, with emphasizing that you as an individual have options, and not everything is dictated by the market.
Well, this was very helpful, and thank you so much for taking the time and explaining and everything.
Hey, well, thanks for dropping by.
Thank you so much. So, see you when the course starts.
I hope so. All
Thank
right,
you. Ciao.
take care.